I want to make two other points that why I always think nonfiction writing is important, not only to the journalist but also to every citizen living in this era. The first point I want to make is nonfiction writing is the way to keep you checking this reality, never check out. You must stay grounded in reality. It is better to acknowledge our limitations than to hastily declare the end of history or the end of anything else. Be with the real people, not waiting for them in an imaginary future. And nonfiction writing is the best practice to keep yourself like that. We can all recall how in the summer of 1989, I remember the 63-year-old Francis Fukuyama penned a famous essay declaring the end of history. At that time, he believed Western liberal democracy had trumped over its adversaries, becoming the final rational form of society and the state, the ultimate victor. So hence, history has concluded. Today, history may be on the brink of ending once again. So many perceive that liberal democracy has failed. Though the endpoints of victory or failure may seem different, the desire to summon an end time is strikingly similar. It's a tendency deeply rooted in human psychology. An author of a classic study on human cognitive bias used to say that history, it seems, is always ending today. This desire leads people to abandon delving deeper into the difficulties of reality and abandon much richer discussions on plenty of topics. When we declare an end to something, it signifies giving up all internal efforts and transitioning into a philosophical debate on the possibility of alternatives, which is often very, very hollow. I always remember at a media company I once worked for in Hong Kong, our boss often said, I think we have got about 2 years left. He repeated it almost every week. This was in 2010, when he believed that the recent global financial crisis would expose the deep-seated flaws of capitalism, ultimately impacting China and potentially even toppling its regime. So 2 years at most, he would say, suggesting that the CCP would face significant crisis and might collapse if political reform wasn't here. Initially, I couldn't understand why he kept repeating these meaningless words as a journalist, but later I understood it was exactly why he invested in media. If a crisis were to hit the CCP, what would we do, right? For instance, we could need the media to debate China's future, debate democracy's future. So by investing in a small intellectual media outlet now, he was preparing for some dramatic things to happen 2 years later. He placed himself that way in an imagined future 2 years later, and disengaged from the reality of the present. Indeed, that media outlet I used to work for only survived for a little over 2 years. When the anticipated end of history does not occur, the boss lost the motivation to continue. Psychologists tell us that this illusion of the end of history robs people of hope for change. This may lead us to not try as hard as anything in reality because we feel like any effort will be wasted and that nothing good could ever come from our efforts anyway. You might find these individuals somewhat familiar. In my years as a journalist, I've encountered far too many elites and intellectuals who live in this kind of imagined future. They set the questions of whether the CCP can survive as a premise of all other issues. If the former is not resolved, there is no need to discuss the latter, nor there is any need or possibility to make an effort. Thus, time comes to a standstill, but the future never arrives in this way. They soon become this kind of people, this kind of elites soon become irrelevant to the reality and find no landing ground for the future as well. So this state of impotence is precisely the breeding ground of authoritarianism itself. Now you can see a weird situation. Many individuals who are trying to imagine a free China or a collapse of a regime in some abstract future, supporting leaders in other countries who undermine liberal democracy now. So that's why I always want to emphasize nonfiction writing and nonfiction reading. You need to keep yourself checking the reality, no matter how difficult the reality is, and you can check in the reality in a very interesting and clever way to know more people, to interview more people, to write down their stories, to tell their stories to others. So that's why I try to open these nonfiction writing classes in National Taiwan University. The second point, or the last point I want to emphasize is don't give up on understanding the complete reality. Try to make your craft more and more skilled, and it's the don't give up making connections with real individuals, even in this very polarized social media era. It's all from my own experience. My career began as a journalist, affording me the opportunity to interact deeply with various people. Some blossomed into friendship following meaningful exchanges, while others, even if our paths have diverged, leave behind a linked sense of connection after having glimpsed into each other's lives. I later realized that these kind of deep but varying emotional connections born from truly seeing another person through the writing became the driving force behind many of my efforts. For instance, when I befriended someone from Taiwan and we shared intimate discussions about our lives after interviews, I felt a sharper, more unbearable discomfort when my Chinese friend casually mentioned using force to unify Taiwan, these kind of words. So for the sake of my Taiwanese friend, I couldn't help but intervene. Yet my Chinese friend, who is widely regarded as a good person in his daily life, unconsciously dehumanized Taiwanese people, unwittingly becoming one of the myriad few sources for political hatred. So this kind of situation arises from a tightly structured trap. To prevent this, we need to dismantle this trap. However, it's not easy. It's very difficult. I need to be able to articulate history more comprehensively and analyze the underlying reasons more deeply in all kinds of stories. So it was these two authentic friendships that fueled my desire to still delve deeper into understanding complex political relations. It motivated me to document multidimensional stories of individuals in this era through nonfiction reporting. This motivation, though seemingly straightforward, I deeply believe is still the key to unraveling authoritarianism. Authoritarian regimes thrive by dehumanizing individuals. It's the nature of authoritarianism. So to counteract authoritarianism and the distorted world it creates, the most fundamental approach is to combat it from a higher or more abstract position of power. Instead, it's about restoring the humanity it erases, bit by bit, through writing, action, and connection. As Hannah Arendt famously stated, she didn't love nations or peoples. She loved only her friends. The only love she knew and believed in was the love for humanity. I was always deeply moved by the authenticity in her words when I read them as a child. But many years later, I understood their political significance. Restoring humanity is a form of resistance against authoritarian itself, and that's why, again, the importance of nonfiction writing. The nature of nonfiction writing is restoring humanity bit by bit. Maybe I can have another example between mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. My team and I have conducted numerous in-depth reports before in Asian media, in different medias. Official propaganda and cognitive manipulation have intentionally fueled conflicts among these regions for a long time. So through storytelling, we aim to bridge these gaps and allow ordinary people to see each other beyond the propaganda. I firmly believe that if one person truly understands another's stories, like we elaborated before, we spend so many times to try to immerse in one stories and translate it to another. If your reader can truly understand that, then in the next outbreak of conflict, it's no longer abstract. It's not about an abstract place or an abstract us versus them. That person will hesitate because of the empathy they have developed. So thus the purpose of that story is fulfilled. It's again, the restoring humanity and maybe the process of peace. So thank you all for joining us in our nonfiction writing classes. I hope it can help you, maybe inspire you, no matter if you are trying to be a journalist or you just try to write a long form story. It's all about story, but also beyond the story. Thank you all.